So let me guess. Free, got it home, vibrates like hell. Getting close. How about you hit something hard? Like you hit something real hard. We gotta replace that crankshaft, bud. So first things first, we need to go ahead and drain all the fluids, drain the oil and drain the fuel. Next, we need to remove the fan shroud. So there should be 3 bolts holding it on. Move that to the side and lift up the fan shroud in the fuel tank. It's all one piece and set it to the side. So next, we want to go ahead and disconnect the spark plug or remove the spark plug. Go ahead and take off the fan assembly itself. There's one 19mm bolt holding it on. Next, we need to go ahead and remove the studs that hold on the fan shroud. Note, the one up front is a different size and has a gold tint to it. That stays with the coil. And don't forget to disconnect the ground wire on the bottom of the coil. So next, we need to remove the flywheel. So first off, this thing's made of aluminum, so don't go beating on it with a hammer. Another thing is there's markings on the flywheel that say pulley or puller. That's because that's where they want you to set the 2-jaw pulley puller. So yes, you will need a 2-jaw pulley puller to remove the flywheel. Go ahead and get it nice and snug against the flywheel and should pop off or lift off with ease. And if you have a cast iron flywheel, do the opposite of a aluminum flywheel. You're going to want to set the pulley puller away from the magnet because, well, it's just held on by glue and one screw. So make sure that you set your pulley puller jaws away from the magnet so you don't rip it off. Go ahead and disconnect the fuel line, and we're going to go ahead and remove the carburetor assembly as one piece. So you're going to want to unlink the governor spring and the return spring. So a little pro tip, when keeping everything nice and neat, go ahead and put the carburetor all back together. Use the screws and the studs it came with to put it back together or hold it together temporarily until we reinstall it. This will reassure which order it needs to go back on when it's time to reinstall. Remove the heat shield for the muffler. There should be 3 bolts holding it on. This will come in handy when it's time to separate the crankcase from the oil pan. Go ahead and remove the 4 bolts holding on the valve cover. So just beware, even though we drained all the oil, there's still going to be a little bit of excess oil that comes out. So just be caution. Also, that stuff acts like an adhesive. So when you do take that valve cover off, you might have to pry it off. All right, so let's temporarily go to the other side of the deck. We're going to need to start taking everything off underneath it. So remove both of the blades. They're held on by a 14mm bolt, and also remove the blade adapter. All right, so this is where it's going to make or break your repair. In order to properly replace the crankshaft, this pulley must come off. The problem is, if it's old, it ain't going to want to come off. Most likely, 9 times out of 10, this pulley is going to be seized to the crankshaft. It's not going to want to go anywhere. So there are 2 ways to get this off and 1 way how not to get it off. So you either could use heat or vibration. In this video, we're going to use simple vibration. We're using a palm nailer or auto hammer, or some people call it a cordless air hammer. Basically, we're going to vibrate this thing off. If you do use this method, you will have to replace the blade adapter bolt, because when we're done, that bolt's going to look like a mushroom because we're going to start beating the heck out of this thing. You could also use a pry bar while you're trying to impact it off. But basically, we need to make sure that we don't use a pulley puller. So if the lawnmower is really old and this thing is severely seized to the crankshaft, do not use a pulley puller because you will break off the ears. I promise you. If the lawnmower is fairly new, then yes, you could use a pulley puller, but basically this is how it's done. There we go. So here's the aftermath of the bolt of what it looks like. It's not good. It looks like a straight mushroom. I mean, look at that. I can't even get a socket on this thing. So please believe me, if you use this method, please replace that bolt. And rest assured, I'll put everything in the description area that is replaced during this repair. And the last thing we need to remove is the control cable. We should be free after this. So let's go ahead and remove the cam gear assembly. But first, we need to set this to top dead center. It's very easy. The cam lobe, it looks like a teardrop, needs to be facing away from the flywheel. The only thing that's holding it in is the cam shaft with the rubber grommet. So just use a pick and just push that dowel pin all the way down, and it should be free. Once you have that all the way down, you should be able to lift it up and pull out the camshaft. With the camshaft completely removed, the cam gear assembly should just lift right out. Just get that belt out the way and it should slide right out. There are 8 bolts holding on the crankcase and the oil pan. So you got your 1 and 2, 3 and 4 on both sides, total of 8. We need to go ahead and remove all 8 bolts. And of course, there's always that last bolt. This one I had to get off. I couldn't get a power tool to it, but you are more than welcome to take the governor link out the way if you're comfortable doing that. All right, let's go ahead and spread it apart. So there's 2 areas or 2 slots that are designated to pry on. You could fit a flathead screwdriver in here or a small pry bar, but basically we need to separate the oil pan from the crankshaft. There's one here and there's going to be the same slot or detent on the other side. Now, keep in mind, if the lawnmower is old, this is not only a gasket, this is an adhesive, so you might put up a fight. So don't be afraid to get in there with your screwdriver or pry bar and separate this thing. Also, there's dowel pins in there that might put up a fight as well, but just remember, you don't have to be too gentle. If it does put up a fight, don't be afraid, get her separated. You'll notice once you get it apart, you'll feel some kind of release or air pocket that's got a gap in it now, and it should just wiggle right out. Go ahead and lift it and separate it from the deck. All right, so before we start taking everything apart, let's take a quick inventory check. Make sure you document what you're taking apart or use a phone and record yourself. That's the best tool you probably have. So keep in mind, there is the thrush washer. That's the first thing that needs to come out. It's either going to be stuck down here at the bottom of the oil pan, or it's going to be stuck to the plastic part of the crankshaft or the cam gear assembly up there. But regardless, just make sure you know where it's at. It needs to come off. Go ahead and remove the belt. Next, remove the cam gear. And keep in mind, this thing's almost impossible to put on backwards. If you do, I'd be amazed. But there's a small little detent right here on the cam gear. See that thing right there? It needs to go in that slot on the crankshaft. Can't put this in backwards. Remove the bolts that hold on the connecting rod cap. I think they're 8mm or 10mm. I can't remember. I think they're 10mm. And wiggle that free. It's also known as the oil dipper. And then you should be able to pop that cylinder all the way down to the top dead center and wiggle this crankshaft right out. That poor traumatized crankshaft. Reinstall in reverse order. So hopefully you got your new part and it's the right part. We're not going to go ahead and point fingers at the parts department because you ordered this. So these are about, on average, used on eBay, $50 to $70. A lot cheaper than a new mower. So just match up your parts. Hopefully you measured it out. The dates might be a little bit different, but the part number should be the same. So if you're buying this online, just be careful. There's a difference. There's the crankshaft with the blade stop feature and the crankshaft without the blade stop feature. All right, here's the fun part. So this is the cleaning part. So you're either going to grab the lowest guy on the totem pole in the shop or grab your kid because we got to get this thing clean. So you got 2 ways to clean this. You could use your traditional gasket scraper like the one seen here. This is the safest way to remove the old gasket without scarring or damaging the matted surface. Or if you just, want to speed up the process, or you're just, not an amateur, you can go ahead and use the old whiz wheel. I'm sorry for you purists out there, a pneumatic die grinder. Beware though, if you do choose to use the old die grinder, or what I like to call whiz wheel, you can damage the surface. So be gentle. But the flip side is, this is way more efficient and less time consuming, and just is equally equivalent to a gasket scraper just on speed. So make sure you remove the old gasket, the entire gasket, on both sides, the oil pan and the crankcase. We're going to use brake clean. We are not going to use any kind of degreaser. If you use some kind of degreaser, you're going to only subject yourself to a oily substance or some kind of residue or film that's going to be hard to get rid of. So brake clean or parts clean only when removing the old gasket. It may help to go ahead and remove both the dowel pins. So these are kind of tricky to clean around. Basically, you can remove these, just don't forget to reinstall them. By removing the dowel pins, will make it easier to clean around and give you a better seal when it comes to applying the gasket maker. Once you remove the old gasket entirely and you're satisfied, go ahead and follow it up with some Scotch-Brite. This will remove any remaining gasket that is left on the matted surface, leaving a more desired finish for the gasket to adhere to. So before we install the new crankshaft, we need to lubricate some very important parts. Go ahead and lubricate the part where the crankshaft where it's going to meet the oil seal. Using clean, fresh oil, we need to lubricate the connecting rod bearing, the connecting rod cap, the inside cylinder wall, the oil dipper, and the crankshaft bearing itself. Clean, fresh oil. So to ease the operation of reinstallation or rebuilding the crankshaft, we're going to install this upside down. So that means we're going to have to flip this upside down, and everything we install going forward is going to be upside down. Keep that in mind. So first, go ahead and insert the crankshaft. Next, we're going to install the timing gear. Remember that detent? That needs to go there. Give a little wiggle, make sure it's nice and properly seated. Go ahead and grab your new belt or your old belt. Slide it all the way through the block up towards the cam gear assembly temporarily and set it in place on the cam gear. Next, we're going to install the thrush washer. Keep in mind, there is a slight collar or curvature to this. It needs to be facing up. Remember, we're installing this upside down. So when we turn this right side up, that collar needs to be facing down. Next, go ahead and install the oil dipper or the connecting rod cap. So keep in mind, there's two little things that need to match up. Number one, your oil dipper is facing to the right because it's upside down right now. And number two, your projections or projectors. They're two little nubs. They need to line up and make sure that they are properly installed. So you'll see right here on both sides, there are two little nubs, the projectors that need to line up on each side. Make sure those are aligned and we can go ahead and install our connecting rod bolts. Tighten down those connecting rod bolts, not with an impact. And for you purists out there, the torque spec for the connecting rod bolts is 8 foot-pounds. Go ahead and grab your cam gear assembly and we're going to go ahead and reinstall that next. But a couple things to notate. We need to install this top dead center, which means the lobe needs to be facing away from the flywheel. Top dead center. Remember, away from the flywheel. So note, there are two little markings or two little dashes on here. There's one right here and there's one right here. These need to line up with the cylinder head or the top of the block. Those two dashes need to line up right here. The imaginary line right here, or not so imaginary. It needs to line up with the top of the cylinder head. So go ahead and lift up the belt, and it could be a soft install. They don't need to be perfect when you put it in the first time, but we're going to fine tune it later. Go ahead and rotate the piston all the way to top dead center, and the arrow on the crankshaft right here needs to line up with this line right here. That way we know it's at top dead center. Grab your cam gear assembly, slide it on in. Remember, it doesn't need to be perfect right now. We're going to tune this later, but just lift that belt up and get the lines as close as possible, and you should be good to go ahead and install the camshaft. Go ahead and install that camshaft. Push it all the way down till you feel it snap into place. That means that the O-ring or that rubber grommet is in properly seated place, and it should be good to go. All right, so now we're going to fine tune this thing. So make sure the belt is not attached to the cam gear right now. Go ahead and line up your marks, your two dashes, and it's got to be pretty perfect. As long as that lobe's facing away, you're good. Double check your arrows on the crankshaft and the line on the cylinder wall or the outer cylinder wall are lined up, and you should be good to go. All right, double check your work. Make sure your stars are all aligned. So at the top, we've got both our dashes perfectly aligned with the top of the cylinder head, and the arrow and the line at the bottom by the crankshaft are lined up. Here's a little pro tip for you. I'm going to go ahead and replace the crankcase seal while we're in the job. This is completely optional, but I do recommend doing it. Sometimes you can damage these. There's a small spring inside of here, but you might want to have one on hand just in case. Also, it's not very easy to take apart the crankcase, so we might as well replace it while we're here. One last courtesy wipe, because we just lubricated all of our important moving parts. And remember what I said earlier, it has to be dry and clean. So when you're applying your gasket maker or your Honda Bond or equivalent like a Loctite 5900, your goal is to lay a 1.5 to 2 millimeter diameter line or gasket evenly across the matted surface. This isn't a birthday cake, so don't overdo it and don't underdo it. Just make sure you have a consistent gasket or line across the matted surface. And we're only going to apply this to the crankcase, not the oil pan. Because remember, we are bringing the oil pan to the crankcase. So just apply your gasket maker or Honda Bond to the crankcase. When applying the gasket maker to the matted surface, if you notice that it's not sticking or adhering to the surface, like it's just slipping off, that means the area is not clean and there's some kind of oily or residue left on the surface. If this is valid, go back and re-clean it. Once you're done applying the gasket maker, go back and double check your work. Fill in any thin spots or gaps that you may have missed. All right, let's back up. Let's reverse a little bit. Before we merge these two together or marry them together, there's a couple things you need to do or be aware of. This governor gear must align with the cam gear. This is crucial because you're not going to know this until it's all glued back together and you can't spin the crankshaft. If that's the scenario, that means that the governor gear and the cam gear are not aligned. So I recommend doing a dry run. Practice doing this before you apply your gasket maker. To reassure that these gears align up, you're going to want to rotate the crankshaft while you're installing the oil pan to the crankcase. At the same time, make sure your dowel pins are lined up. While rotating the crankcase or the crankshaft while lowering down the oil pan to the crankcase, this will reassure that these are lined up and you're not going to panic or not know what's going on when the gasket maker is already applied to the surface. When this does happen, it'll kind of just drop. The whole block will just kind of drop and set into its place. So when you go to try to spin this crankshaft and you got it all back together and it's not spinning freely, those gears are not aligned. Or if you notice there's a small gap between the crankcase and the oil pan. It's kind of hard to see here. I'll try my best to show you in real time and slow time what I'm talking about and what you want to look out for or what you really want to see when these do line up together. Because if you have to redo this and your gasket maker is fresh, it is not fun to clean. Trust me. There we go. See how it dropped? That's what you want. That's exactly what you want. Just rotate that thing around till she drops into place and you know you're in gear. Did you see it? It dropped right into place. That's exactly what you want. I'll show it again in slow motion. Finally, 5 days later, let's finally get this thing back together. So just very simple, reinstall in reverse order. There's 8 bolts. Go ahead and reinstall all 8 bolts for the crankcase first. Reinstall the valve cover as well, but first you're going to have to clean the old gasket off. Remember, dry and clean. Same process. When you're done, go ahead and apply your gasket maker on the inside of all the holes and around the holes as well and install it to the block. Pro tip, if you damage the valve cover taking it off when you're prying on it, I recommend replacing the valve cover as a whole. Torque specs for the valve cover gasket bolts are 8.7 foot-pounds. Go ahead and reinstall the engine to the deck. There's 4 bolts holding it on. Torque specs for 12mm fasteners, according to Honda, is 40 foot-pounds. After installing the pulley and the belt, go ahead and install the blade adapter. Before you install the blade adapter, make sure that you have your ward-off key. Insert the ward-off key and the blade adapter, line them up, and slide it right on. So the torque specs for the blade adapter bolt and the blades are going to be 36 to 43 foot-pounds. So before we could go ahead and install the flywheel, we need to go ahead and reconnect our control cable for the brake pad for the flywheel. So go ahead and reattach the cable. You might have to go ahead and pull on the control lever up top to give you some slack and snap that right into place. When installing the flywheel, make sure that the ward-off key up top right here is lined up correctly and slide it into place. Install the fan assembly. Make sure it lines up with the detent on the fan, along with the washer, along with the flywheel nut, and you're going to torque it down to 38 foot-pounds for a aluminum flywheel and 55 foot-pounds for cast iron flywheel. Go ahead and reinstall the carburetor assembly in the following order. It's going to be your insulator gasket, followed by the auto choke assembly, followed by the air gasket, the carburetor assembly, and don't forget your links. So hook up your governor return spring and the governor link arm, carburetor gasket, and don't forget that fuel line. And while we're at it, go ahead and turn on that fuel shutoff valve and the air filter box assembly or housing, air filter housing box assembly. And set your air gap for your ignition coil. According to Honda, the air gap clearance should be 0.2 to 0.5 millimeters. Reinstall the spark plug along with the heat shield for the muffler. And finally, go ahead and reinstall the fan shroud and the fuel tank assembly. Don't forget to hook up your fuel line and also the pull rope assembly. And finally, add oil, add fuel, and you're done. All right, so we've let it sit for a little bit, and fresh new crank on the inside. Let's check that oil level on that. She's hot. Remember, Honda dipsticks, you don't want to stick them in all the way. So for anybody that cares, background on this lawnmower is one of my very good friends at work, Mr. Veal, said, hey, Kip, there's this free Honda lawnmower in my neighborhood. It's always free. Free Honda. Yours are going to perk a little bit. Just a little bit. He's like, yeah, a guy said it's really good shape. He said his wife just ran over, just hit the car with it. Ran over it with the car. But I didn't ask questions. But that was the story. Oh, and we've got before and after pictures. So we pretty much rebuilt this thing. I mean, this is probably worth about $200, but yeah, take a look at that wheel. Take a look at that axle. She straight up ran over it with her car. Anyways, we get it home and start her up, and she's vibrating a little bit. So I said to myself, well, I'll just buy new blades for it. So I got new blades, flipped her over, and look at there. Oh, hang on. Well, it's on both sides, but this is what came on it. Just a little bit. A lot of bit or a little bit. So that was on there. And I knew right away, I was like, oh, no wonder it's a curbside special. The curbside special lawnmowers, folks, especially Hondas, good looking Hondas, that crankshaft is bent 9 times out of 10. If you have any questions, let me know.